So now let's talk about the various episodes or the eras of evolution of life. The first one which we have a fossil record of is known as the Ediacaran era, and it existed from 630 to 542 million years ago. Here, the life forms that were found were mostly aquatic, and they resembled today's jellyfishes or mollusks that we find, or even worms, but they were pretty much primitive. They were multicellular, as well as unicellular organisms could also be found. Moving on to the next era was the Cambrian era, and it existed from 542 to 485 million years ago. And in this particular era, organisms still were aquatic, but now they evolved in size and also in their structures. You might notice that now they have this particular exoskeleton, which was mainly made up of chitin and other proteins. One of the major organisms whose fossil records are very well preserved from the Cambrian era is known as a trilobite, as I was saying. And here, for the first time, we could find prey-predator relationships. So we could find some larger organisms like this one, which used to be the predator, which attacked smaller organisms and feed on them, those being the prey. The next period, which is smaller than an era, is known as the Ordovician Period, which existed from 485 to 445 million years ago. And as you can see from the fossil records, they looked somewhat similar to a starfish. And those predators that I was talking about now grew further in size. They evolved some unique characteristics, which again gave them an edge over others. For example, tentacles. It helped them to catch their prey more efficiently. Whereas the preys also evolved certain features which gave them an edge to survive. For example, they started growing some hard shells like a snail, inside which they could now live and stay protected from those predators. And because of these particular features and edges, life form suddenly saw a huge boost in its quantity, and there was again a large number of flora and fauna in this aquatic setting during this Ordovician period. And as I told you in the preamble, that whenever there is a huge flourishment of life and the competition rises, it is followed by a major mass extinction event. So this was the first mass extinction that occurred on Earth, and it was believed that it happened because of a sudden rise in oxygen level as well as the temperatures. For example, the hot areas became hotter and the cold areas became cooler. This mainly happened because of the change of the atmospheric composition. And as plants started to flourish more and cyanobacterium started to grow more, the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere started to rise tremendously, and therefore reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that caused the fluctuation in the temperature. And since this was the early times of oxygen being created in the atmosphere, there was really no good amount of ozone that could shield Earth from the harmful UV rays. So those were the reasons for this particular first mass extinction. But although it might be sad that so many life forms died, it made way for new life forms to evolve. So the period or the era that followed this particular mass extinction is known as the Silurian era, and it existed from the 445 million years to 420 million years ago. And now this new forms of life could be found on the surface. They were still aquatic, not so much covered with the chitinous hard exoskeleton, and they had some new features. For example, they had prominent eyes, they had gills, they had fins, they had a tail, which was not found so far. So that's a major improvement in characteristic, helping them in their survival as well as mating as well as finding food. At the same time, plants started to evolve more on the land surfaces, on the landmass, moving out from the aquatic setting, and that allowed certain organisms to grow on those plants and move out of water for some particular amount of time. Still, they had their hard exoskeletons, and these were the precursors for the insects that we know today. For example, the dragonfly with wingspans of more than 1 meter of length, and scorpions which grew up to 1.8 meters. That's a ridiculously huge size for a scorpion. And these sort of organisms started to evolve after this particular mass extinction event in the Silurian era. This was followed by one of the most amazing periods in the evolution of life that is known as the Devonian Period, which spanned from 420 million years ago to 360 million years ago. And as you can see from the fossil records, that plants flourished more outside water now. So we could find terrestrial plants and terrestrial flora to flourish more, and that also helped or made an impact on the life forms that were existing underneath the water to move out, because now food was available more on the surface. So to avoid the competition underneath water, they started to move out. And you might also notice that the exoskeleton has now moved inwards, and now it is being referred to as the endoskeleton, or the skeleton that we know today, like the ones that we have. So the typical amphibian-like or the reptilian-like skeleton structure was formed in this particular Devonian period, with 4 legs or limbs with 5 digits, that is 5 fingers. And this was a true amphibian era where animals could survive both on land as well as underwater. But again, when this was happening, there was another mass extinction event that occurred, and this one is speculated to have been occurring because of some sort of natural disaster or climate change. But again, it made way for life forms to flourish more on the surface, because those few amphibians which crept out of water onto the land surface were completely destroyed, whereas the ones which lived inside water could survive freely. Now, what was the result or the consequence of this particular extinction is pretty much interesting, because that was one of the major reasons why we can survive, not human beings, but why so many organisms can survive on the surface. So that gave rise to the Carboniferous period, which existed from 360 to 300 million years ago. And as the name suggests, there was more terrestrial life forms with hard porous scales, the true origin of reptiles, and their hard carbonate-rich eggshells, which helped them to stay on the land surface for long without the requirement to go back to the water for laying eggs or hatching them. They could survive the dry condition on the surface, and that was a major step in allowing life forms to evolve on land. This was followed by the Permian period, which existed from 300 to 250 million years ago. And this was an interesting period because here we could find the first evidences of mammals. These organisms also, although they look quite like dinosaurs, they are not dinosaurs, but they can be regarded as precursors. And synapsids were basically the first mammals that originated on Earth. They gave rise to their own babies without the need to lay an egg, and the baby survived on the mother's milk, as we know from our elementary levels. So be it a dog or a monkey or even you, this is your first ancestor. The name's synapsid. But then there was again another mass extinction, which is also referred to as the Great Dying, because almost 70% of animal diet and almost 30% of the plants also got extinct because of this particular mass extinction event. It is speculated that this happened because of a massive volcanic eruption on the surface of Earth. But again, as on the flip side of the coin, there's always something brighter to look at. The Triassic period gave rise to the most dominant and the most strongest categories of reptiles that the Earth has ever seen, which are the precursors of dinosaurs, and it was from 250 to 200 million years ago. So these precursors of dinosaurs could occupy the entire landmass that was available because of the mass extinction event. There was hardly any competition for life forms to survive and to have the food that was available, so they could easily flourish. And also in some particularly very small niches, mammals also survived, which were however very small in size. And then again came another extinction event. The reason is still unclear to most people that what caused this particular extinction, but this particular extinction wiped off a major component of those precursors reptiles, whereas the mammals could survive because they were small and they lived underneath the rocks somewhere, hidden in a burrow. So this particular mass extinction event wiped off all other reptiles and made way for the most ferocious reptiles ever to have ruled the planet, that is the dinosaurs, and ultimately the Tyrannosaurus rex, to evolve on Earth. So this is the most interesting period, as all of you might agree, due to the various movies that have been done over the years. So the Jurassic and the Cretaceous period together span more than 100 million years. That's spanning from 200 to 65 million years ago. And in the earlier part, that is in the Jurassic part, it was more herbivorous dinosaurs that ruled. And only in the Cretaceous period that it was a period when we saw the rise of Tyrannosaurus rex. So this is a very familiar period to most of you. The landforms was filled with reptiles which were unique and big and ferocious, the dinosaurs, various different species, various different characteristics, and also the flora, that is the plants, were mostly gymnosperms, not the angiosperms, not the flowering plants that we see today, but the ones which bore cones and other fruits. So these gymnosperms were the ones which were mostly found in the Jurassic and the Cretaceous period. And as of today, we have just one living fossil, as we like to call it, only one species of gymnosperms surviving on Earth, and it's known as Ginkgo biloba. But as we all know, the dinosaurs did get extinct because of a massive asteroid strike, as it has been speculated by various scientists. This caused a massive extinction and wiped off the dinosaurs completely from the surface of Earth, making them extinct forever. But this particular mass extinction event helped the mammals to actually come out of their hiding places and to move freely in the available surface of Earth now, because there was no ferocious competition. They could occupy the various areas that was present, and it helped them to develop their traits and to actually it actually gave them a better chance of survival as well as a better rate of reproduction. And therefore, this particular trait of mammals, that is giving rise to their own babies without the help of an egg, became more and more dominant, and it helped in the adaptive radiation. So from those small mammals that existed in the dinosaur ruled period, now gave rise to various different types of organisms, for example, the bears or the koalas.